It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to this episode of Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and we are actually kind of like splicing this episode from another episode because this was a topic that came up between Jess and I, and we wanted to talk about it. And I just think we just thought it was such a good, potent topic, and we really wanted to get feedback on this individually, where it was kind of piggybacked on another episode. So this episode is about, I was wearing a Make America Healthy hat, Make America Healthy Again hat. Jess talks about this in the episode too, but it's kind of what spawned this discussion. And we just really wanted to share different takes on what that looks like. So this is a short and sweet episode, but yeah, we hope you guys like this one.
Okay, me and Jill kind of had an argument, not an argument, but like a debate before we turned on our recording today. So do we want to go a little unhinged?
Yeah, we're going a little unhinged today.
Okay, Jill had a Make America Healthy Again hat, which spawned this conversation because I've been really into listening to RFK's speeches about health and food processing and all of that. Because obviously, like, that's what we do for a living, is we want to actually prevent disease and help people eat healthier, not retroactively say like, okay, insurance, let's go ahead and cover all these diseases we could have prevented. So the issue is very close to home for both of us. But I told Jill I feel mixed because I wonder if it like interferes with capitalism to say the government can put stipulations on what companies can and cannot produce. So like our friend Christina, she's another coach on our team. She lives in Australia, and we talked to her the other day about this, and she said like it was wild to her when she came to America. I think she went to like Miami or something, but she said the fact that in the grocery stores, you just have all these heavily processed foods staring at you down every aisle. She was like, I see why it's so hard to stay fit and healthy, because you just have these abundant, like calorically abundant foods everywhere. And she said, I was on vacation. I was like, yeah, Snickers bar, Doritos, whatever. But she said, that's just not the case here. We walk down the supermarket aisle and you see more whole food options. So the health benefits of it, I see completely, but then it freaks me out to say the government can have control of what a company is or is not allowed to produce. Like regulations freak me out, because then it's like, okay, then how far do we take regulations? Can they start banning other things from production, like things like that? So Jill, you said you had another take on this, and then we started recording and we didn't talk about it more. So I'm curious.
Like pause. I know I have to remember what my thought was, but I had brought up like the variants in UK. Like people talk about this a lot, how they can't eat like bread, or they have like feel like they have celiac or gluten intolerance, and then they go to UK and eat bread and cheese, and they have issues, right? So like I agree in that, like, where do you draw the line? And honestly, like, I'm not really trying to bring politics into this, but like that's most of my issue with politics is like, where do we draw the line, and who gets to draw it on any topic is where the biggest problem, I think, with everyone in politics is it can't be a free for all. So we need some structure, but like who decides on the structure and what's right and wrong, right? Like obviously that's what we're voting on, but ultimately, like the UK, like there's a lot of videos, and of course this is my algorithm because I read about a lot of this, but it'll be a box of like a certain cereal here from the US, and then the same exact cereal box from the UK, and they're totally different ingredient lists, and we have all this extra shit and chemical dyes and whatever in our cereal, and we know that's not good for us. And I agree, like, do we just come from this from a place? I mean, it's like smoking, right? Like you can still buy cigarettes, and we all know the risks of smoking and the health negative side effects, but people educate and they choose not to use that thing, even though the company.
And it's a little, I like that theory, because then it's not saying, oh, ban it. It's saying create real awareness around it. Don't allow marketing to say this is a healthy product when there's 400 processed ingredients in that product. Just because it has one healthy ingredient in it, they're allowed to slap.
You have to ban everything. I think I do think there should be some more structure in it, in that it's very hard to, if you do have knowledge or you are trying to avoid those things, it is not very accessible, honestly, to buy. I mean, sure, fruits and veggies, like Whole Foods are accessible, but like it can be more difficult to access those types of foods. Like if I'm looking for gluten-free options or whatever, or
if somebody doesn't have as much options as you and I, and they're in an inner city, it's like, okay, what processed foods are less processed? Like I like that
Correct.
you just explained that about, okay, it's not giving less options or telling the companies they can't do it. It's refining guidelines on what shit they're allowed to pump our food with. And I really liked your cigarette example because it's like, okay, tax the things and make them less accessible to like candy is literally at my kids' eyes in the Walgreens, right? So making it less accessible where it's like, okay, you're 18 and actually, I'm interrupting myself. Sorry, another tangent. I saw a video yesterday and it was kids in, I think it was British. I think it was in the UK and it was Mountain Dew. They were doing a taste test of Mountain Dew and they said over there it's banned. Not that it's banned. It is a thing that you can only get if you're 18 or older because of the high caffeine intake. So it's sold like an energy drink is sold. Whereas here we're just feeding our kids Mountain Dew all day long. And again, sub Mountain Dew for whatever sugary thing that you want to talk about or red dye thing or whatever. But they were tasting it and they were like, oh my gosh, it's so sweet. Like, this is crazy. Those kids just weren't accustomed to it, right? So maybe like some sort of thing like that. Again, I'm not saying tax every single product or anything like that, but it's like if you make the less healthy stuff less accessible, people are going to tend to have to make healthier choices.
Well, and if there's more, like if we take all of these like funds and things that we're trying to decide what's the direction we go here as a country, if we did that on education, like we do smoking education as kids, right? Like in school, like it's very basic, obviously, but like my mom put the fear of God in me when it came to smoking cigarettes. Like I was like, shit, I can't do that. That thing's terrible for me, right? Like I had enough education to know that wasn't good for me, but that doesn't happen with nutrition at all. Most people don't even know how much protein to eat.
Well, and if you look at our nutrition education, like we took health classes in high school and our nutrition education is based on the food pyramid, which is not healthy. It's saying like, okay, eat your cereal and your refined carbs. Like when I went in for my prenatal checkups, they were like, okay, we want to eat more nutrients. So go ahead and buy things like Cheerios that are enriched in vitamins. And I said to my doctor, I'm like, you didn't even suggest real food. You didn't even suggest fruits, vegetables, meat. You just went right to like enriched products. What? Like, this is wild to me. So I think that there is some education. It's wrong education.
Right. So I think if there's more education on proper nutrition, but also on the risks, just like there are of cigarettes, right? Like there are disclaimers on a box of cigarettes. There should be a disclaimer on you are taking a risk by consuming this food, because what I think would happen, and that, like Jill for president, right? But like what I think would happen is if there's more education on those things and people are more aware and they're less inclined to buy them, naturally companies are going to be like, we might.
Let's make healthier products. That's great.
It,
and
right?
then you're supporting capitalism and health at the same time. Right. Then they have to compete in that arena.
I'm not asking you to remove your cereal from the shelves. I'm going to tell everyone else why it's bad and what the risks are if they decide to consume that type of food. And then when we all stop buying fucking Cheerios might change their ingredients, like that's really
right.
At the end. Now, is that a perfect solution? And does that take time? Yeah, like it does take a lot of time. And also, if you think about even like food stamps and those types of things, like the money that and the foods that they have access to suck. Like who decides that? It's not.
Yeah.
And, again, it's another thing of like red tape, like who gets to make that decision. But like, I would rather put more money towards healthier foods and products for them. And like, I know fruits and veggies.
1,000%. 1,000%.
That's where we should be putting funds to like make people healthier. And I genuinely think like, this is health coach in me. And like, I'm obviously diehard about what I do, but like, I really think if we help more people and health is more accessible, than just general quality of life and success in life and everything.
Mental health, ADD, anxiety, depression, everything. All of those things are absolutely linked to what we put in our bodies. I want to make a little disclaimer because of saying like, oh, if Cheerios has to up their game or whatever. The problem with a lot of these foods, if you take one ingredient, because I think there's a big debate on this. Like if you look up any of Lane Norton's videos or something, he's going to say, well, seed oils in themselves aren't inflammatory. It's the caloric. So anyway, if you take any of these single ingredients and you put them in a small dose in your body, it is not going to cause some dire effect. Okay. So you don't have to run and throw away all your foods, right? We're not poisoning ourselves in a tiny dose. The problem with these hyper palatable foods is we end up eating way more calories. So we have become obese as a society because these foods are hyper palatable, meaning when they have added oils and sugars and whatever, we want to eat more and more. So there's been a lot of studies about this, that it's like you end up eating between 5 and 800 calories more if you have processed options versus whole food options, and you're not tracking anything, you're just eating to fullness. You end up eating way more. So then we have an obesity problem, which leads to all the chronic diseases that we have. So I just want to, again, I wanted to kind of reiterate that, because I think sometimes I don't want anybody to be like, okay, I better go. And
there's Instagrams that I think are also fear mongering, and that's definitely not the point, right? Like I love a good bowl of cereal, you know. The point is that I personally, I'm speaking for myself, have enough education to know what ingredients I prefer to avoid based on my research and the risks that can be associated. Like, you know, they talk about Red 40 a lot with kids and the impact it can have on their behavior and everything. So like for me, some people say that's stupid, like whatever, I don't believe that. That's fine. I'm not asking.
I see my kids have behavioral impact. I see Logan's behaviors change when she gets stuff like that. Also, the way that our foods are grown here, you mentioned like having pasta in another country. You go to Italy and you don't have the same gluten reactions, right? It's because of what they spray our crops with here. That is a problem. We know that those things are toxic, and we continue to mass produce them because it's a money-making industry. So like, yeah, that ingredient in itself has become a less healthy thing because of what we're spraying on it during the production of it. So there's just so many not pros and cons, but like, I just want to share multiple sides of it, because again, I don't want to demonize any food. Again, if somebody doesn't have access to food, they need calories, they need food, right? So I don't want it to be like a fear mongering thing. I just, it's an interesting debate, and I am very compelled and hopeful that something changes now, that at least it's a topic. At least it's some sort of platform that's being discussed. Yeah.
You know, you talked about just now with the pesticides. I think the other thing with that when it comes to social media is, you know, people talk about like, oh, Diet Coke is bad and and all this, like all these different things, right?
Yeah.
I think it's also important to understand from a health perspective versus a weight loss perspective, because I think people tend to associate health with like, is this going to make me lose weight or not? And when I'm looking at these things, I am somebody who has struggled with gut health and who has been diagnosed with ADHD, and I do struggle with focus. I do struggle with those things, right? Like there's a lot of environmental components too. And, you know, Jess and I always talk about like what you add, right, is more beneficial. We're not like, I think instead of clearing your shelves, like just go add more produce and go add more sunshine and go add more steps. All of that stuff is minimal, right? And when nobody's perfect. And I do struggle with some of the holistic like social media accounts, and everyone has their own like threshold of like what feels good and balanced for them. Like I might be quote further into a holistic range of life and living than another person, and that's fine. This is just my threshold. So I think that's the other thing to look at, is this is so nuanced. I still have Lysol wipes in my cabinet. Like that's probably frowned upon by most holistic people, right? But like, I also.
But there's layers. There's like we talk about this a lot in terms of prioritizing health. So if somebody comes and signs up with us and they're like, okay, I heard that it's unhealthy to eat gluten, so I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to have red dye, but they're not getting enough protein, then like, I'm starting at protein and I'm not giving them any restrictions or limitations, because first we need to hit that basic need. Okay, now that we've hit that basic need, let's start talking about fruits and vegetables, because you're eating a lot of processed ways to get your fiber. Okay, now once we've hit that basic need, and that's a new norm for you versus feeling like we're just cutting everything out, we are helping our clients discern those needs as they go, because we're not just jumping to, okay, cut everything out of your life, because most people have a lot of room to grow first before needing to even do that.
Right. Which is why adding those things will naturally reduce a lot of the other things that aren't as fulfilling to your health. But like for me, I choose to, like, for me, it's not worth the risk. Like a bag of Doritos or whatever. Like, no, I mean, I love Doritos, but like a random food, like for me, I'm like, okay, even if there's not enough data to support it, right? People will argue with me and be like, yeah, those are fine. You can eat those. That's fine. I'm choosing not to eat that because whatever that risk isn't worth it to me. I don't give a fuck that much about Doritos to eat them if I could potentially link to fucking Alzheimer's down the line or whatever it is, right? Like, bad example. I'm being extreme, obviously, but that's that's really where I
Not
come
really
from.
though. I mean, you're
I
not.
know.
Like
But I'm like,
Alzheimer's
that's
is
my
like
thought
type
process.
2. They're calling it type 3 diabetes now because it starts with metabolic damage, right?
Right.
And overeating processed carbs can lead to that as a problem, right? Like, yeah, that's not it's not exaggerating, right? If that is the bulk of somebody's diet, these hyper palatable, overly processed foods, if that's the bulk of our diet, like, okay, we got to start somewhere
Like,
first.
you don't need to buy organic. They still use X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that's fine. But it's less to me and that's worth it. Even if it's minimal. That's a swap that I choose to make in my life. And I think that's what's important to understand. There's a lot of accounts on social media that kind of go extreme. I think Lane is one of them. And I love Lane for a lot of reasons, but I do think, and he's so intelligent. He's so like educated. Yeah. He does so much research. But for me, I'm like, it's just not worth it to me. I want to thrive and I want to make sure that I'm being proactive, especially with being genetically prone to certain conditions that I don't want anything to do with. So like, I'll be over here wearing my tinfoil hat and doing a Dutch test every 6 months to monitor my estrogen metabolites and all of those things.
Yeah, but if you talk to him about it logically, he's so well researched that I bet he would say, oh no, I agree about that from a behavioral standpoint. I'm saying from a fat loss standpoint, or the dose makes the poison and the studies are on rats. Like, I believe that he would agree with all of that. We just want to share some context because the social media bites are so small, right? So I think it oftentimes leaves people confused one way or the other. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that's it. That's our version of Make America.
Of like, yeah. I'm curious to hear what everybody thinks about it. Again, I'm like, yay, this is a topic, like, period. I don't care what political side you might fall on. The fact that this topic is getting spotlight is exciting and promising for our future,
I saw someone share on social media, and this is kind of my last point on this, but she shared, what the rate of metabolic dysfunction is in our country. And then there was some very large, like, round table, like public thing, like forum, and they were like rolling their eyes at meditation and sun. And I'm like, this is what pisses me off about health in this country, because you can roll your eyes, but like,
look at the data. Look at the data.
Like, what are you rolling your eyes at? Why does that negatively affect you if somebody wants to meditate and spend more time in the sun? I don't get it.
Meanwhile, all of our kids are staring at their phones and addicted to social media and have all these other issues where we're not getting outside and playing like our parents' generation was. Like our generation was. We didn't have cell phones when we were kids. Like, it's not the same world. So they're rolling their eyes, but it's a completely different thing. We need to send some of those slow down, like, hey, just be present type inputs, and it's healthy for our brains is what research across the board shows.
Right. There was a Facebook group recently where this girl was like, I think I might drink too much alcohol. I started to read that alcohol is a toxin. Does anyone have any insight on this? And I cannot tell you, I was like, this is infuriating to read these comments. This girl was like, oh, it's fine. I drink 3 bottles of wine a night and I'm okay. And I was like, okay, how though?
What data is that? Just because you're okay and you're not.
I know there are people that do fucking meth for years and live in the streets, and yeah, they're not dead, but do you think they're thriving? Like, I'm glad that you're alive and you can get up and go to work every day. But if you don't think that's having a negative impact on you and your health in the long run, you are very mistaken.
People will just cherry pick whatever they've heard. Like, oh, well, this person, yeah. And it's like just to validate their own unhealthy choices versus just having like ownership.
Wants to make a change. Let her make a fucking lifestyle change. Don't.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's where we're at. And that's honestly why I do what I do, because I don't want people.
We want to help people get healthy, right? All right. Make America healthy again. Whoop, whoop.
Holler. See you guys.
RFK, if you hear this, we have some business ideas.
See you guys.